Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about part 2 of the raid on Graymalkin, which is a mini crossover event that extends through some of the X titles. And in this case, it's issue number 7 of Uncanny X-Men from the Ashes, written by Gail Simone and art by David Marquez. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. So with that said, this issue opens 1 hour prior to the event in X-Men issue 8, and when we get there we see Rogue on the phone with Cyclops stressing how Graymalkin Prison has kidnapped 2 of her people, and how she was not about to fall back and do nothing about it. But regardless of Rogue complaints, Cyclops just kept telling her to fall back and trust him like in the good old days. But see, what Scott failed to realize was the good old days are now gone and he is completely unable to stop Rogue from getting back her own. So with his pleas going nowhere, Scott went on to ask why she was mad at him, and stated how he didn't know what happened between them and if he let her down somehow along the way. To this loaded question, Rogue replied by saying there is nobody she respected more than him, including Charles, but they all have been waiting for him to step up. But unfortunately, he never did, and on top of that, he can't just go around and teach people how to fight for themselves and then be surprised when they do. So as their argument continued, Rogue was convinced that Scott wasn't trying to hear her out, because Scott told Rogue that there would be too many of them there. And because of their mass numbers, if they all show up, then it wouldn't be seen as a raid, but rather an act of war. And then he asks Rogue to be reasonable, for they don't need her team showing up and only causing bloodshed. Because from Scott's perspective, his team had more of a stealthy feel to it, because he had people like Quentin, Psylocke, and Magic, and if they needed force, then they had Temper and Juggernaut. Now all that was good and everything, but it wasn't what Rogue was getting at, because where Scott was running things like a military, Rogue was more concerned with running her team like a family. And as a family, she wasn't going to play politics with the optics. So before Rogue hung up the phone, she told her old friend to listen closely and tell his team to stay out of her way. So with that conversation over, Rogue then turns to Gambit for his reinsurance in what they was about to conduct. And with that validation in hand, out from the home walked the rest of the team, which included the kids. Now at first Rogue was not happy with their arrival, but Gambit and Wolverine pointed out how they got the right to be there just like them. So with the odds stacked against Rogue, she was forced to concede and give in. This led her to say, the kids could come, but they have to stay outside the walls, and should retreat if they get overrun. So with that issue dealt with, the next thing they had to worry about was transportation, which strangely enough was covered by Gambit. Because the eye in his possession was telling him of a way to teleport by using its magic. Which was exactly what they did, for Gambit held it high above his head, and just like that, a green portal appeared overhead, and off to the races they went. Now while all that was going on, we then transitioned over to Graymalkin Prison following the brutal beatdown of Beast in issue number 8 of X-Men. And when we get there, we see the Warden walking with Calico and Jubilee down the hallway, and during their conversation, we learn that Beast was already being sent off to Terra Verta to answer for Evil Beast's crimes. So with things getting bad, Jubilee threatened to blind the Warden if they lay another hand on Beast again, but unfortunately for her, the Warden was in no mood for threats. So with Jubilee hurt, the Warden then turned to the guard and told him to drop Calico off somewhere far away from her, once her family's check cleared. And on the next page, we see just that, as Calico is led to the front gate and set free. So with Calico on the streets and Beast being dragged away, on the next page we see Temper, Cyclops, and Psylocke teleporting in and ready to carry out their mission as Kane sits ready to do his part and prepare for his dramatic intro. So with everyone in place, we hop back over to Calico fighting her internal thoughts, for within her mind, she was struggling to go against everything her mother taught her up to this point. Because as her mind was telling her to just return home, her soul was telling her to go back and help the family she helped create, and with determination in her heart, she did just that, as she called for Ember her warhorse. And just as the Louisiana X-Men approached the gate, Calico came rushing by them, and with crazy strength, she was able to blow a hole through the stone T-wall and discard 2 tanks as if they were nothing. Now this was the opportunity Rogue and her team were waiting for. After all, once the wall was open, the team rushed in force because at this point the team is safer as a whole than apart. And let's just say that Calico isn't the one to mess with, because even on the next page, she was just running through the structure. Now with that happening, we then see Jubilee waking up in her cell with a fork hidden in her shirt. Now with this one item, Jubilee was able to break her mutant ankle collar and blow a hole clear through her cell as she took off to save Beast from his potential tragic future. So with that said, we hop back over to Cyclops' team when they were reading the guards' minds right before the Trustees came crashing through the wall. And just like in part 1, Blob was close to getting the upper hand on Cyclops until Rogue gracefully stepped in and put him to sleep with a single touch. Now with both teams face to face, Rogue could sense that things were about to get really hairy, for she knew that tremble in Cyclops' voice. Because Cyclops didn't want any form of violence, but he was ready for it none of the less. And as for Rogue's people, she knew who to worry about, because everything hangs on Logan and Ransom staying cool. And with that said, Logan told Ransom to stay calm unless Cyclops reached for his temple, because if he was to do that, then it's go time. So with everything being completely tense, everyone stood still as Rogue told Scott that once they found Jubilee, they would leave and allow Scott to continue with his business. Now this was something that Scott was on the border of agreeing to, until something changed in the air. Out of nowhere, somebody from within the Warden's inner circle sent a sonic anti-aircraft weapon directly at Kid Omega. Now this assault caused Cyclops to reach for his temple in order to call Kid Omega and issue the green light for Kane. Now right as this was going down, the Warden ordered Scurvy to use his powers to make everyone angry. So at that very moment, Ransom noticed Cyclops' temple touch and went in for a direct punch to Scott's face, and just like that, the fight was on. Temper went straight for Wolverine and called him a traitor as Cyclops used his optic beam on Stun to push back Ransom. So with things continuing to escalate, Rogue took a hold of Scott and flew him into the air as Nightcrawler teleported Psylocke somewhere to cool her down. And as for Calico, on the next page, she reunited with Jubilee just in time to come face to face with several guards. But before they could trade blows, out of nowhere Beast came flying in with a thunderous kick, saving the day. So with the prisoners back together, the Warden was not about to roll over without a fight. So in a fit of desperation, she ordered her guards to deploy all their Trustees and what was left of their Wolfpack experiment. The same Wolfpack Sentinels that were highly corrupted back in Sentinels issue number 2. So with all of the Warden's assets coming to bear on the mutants, we then jump back to the battle between the two X-Men teams. So as Magic fought Death Dream, Gambit came to Wolverine's aid as Temper continued her assault. And on the last panel of this page, Rogue put Scott against the wall and told him to surrender, just as Scott pulled his trump card, for on the next page, Juggernaut came crashing in. So, with this game-changing calamity on the scene, a secret room was uncovered in the attack, for before them stood the prison door to Prisoner X. And as they looked on, Scott stated that whatever was in there, they didn't ever want to get out, to which Rogue replied and asked if Scott thought the person within could be Charles. Now this situation between them isn't over quite yet, because Scott laid hands on one of hers, but both sides do have priorities. Now Rogue went on to say, if he's in there, Kane could help her open it. To which Scott asked if they should hold on for a second, and think if they are sure they should open it. But before they could come to a consensus, a voice from behind them all stated that they had a better idea, they all could just turn around and go home. And then on the last page we see Blob, the rest of the Trustees, and the Wolfpack Sentinels standing ready to fight to keep what is in prison tucked away. So with that said, this issue of Uncanny X-Men and part 2 of the raid on Graymalkin comes to an end. Now, when it comes to the raid on Graymalkin, I have to say it isn't the big all-out crossover I hoped it would be, but overall, I am happy to see some of the titles finally crossing over. Now I do like how they are depicting the conflict between Rogue and Cyclops as a battle of ideologies because, up to this point, Cyclops has been operating his faction more as a military-type team that is fighting for the betterment of mutant kind. As for Rogue, she was leading her team as a mother helping to guide her family. This difference in leadership was on full display when Cyclops was trying to make her stand down due to the optics being off. Now when I say that, I'm not suggesting that Rogue's leadership style was better than Cyclops's, but what I was getting at was both leadership styles had their own merits and shortcomings. But anyway, down in the comment section below let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video and please don't forget to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.